Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Inside the GM Studio, podcast all about the tabletop RPG hobby. I am your host, Matt.
And I am David.
And for this week's episode, we got a nice little email from Edward. And in the email, I have to say thank you, Edward. He put in parentheses after saying, "My name is Edward," parentheses, Eddie. Sorry, Matt. Don't worry, dude. I'm not like that anymore. I'm a different person now.
I've
You
turned
want to
over
be,
a new leaf.
yeah, you can be Eddie all you want. You want to be Ed? That's cool too.
Or Eduardo, even, if you
Yeah,
want to have
man.
an
You want
ethnic
Eduardo?
flair to it.
So Edward wrote, with the subject question about using a rival as a main antagonist. He said, "My name's Edward," in parentheses, Eddie. Sorry, Matt. No problem, dude. And I've been really enjoying the podcast. I'm a new listener that has been getting into some of the backlog. Can't wait to get into the farther episodes. I can't believe you guys already have so much. True. And don't worry about it. Just keep listening forward. You don't have to go back that far.
Yeah, it's don't go back too far because audio quality on like the first 10 episodes is pretty shaky.
Yeah, it's bad.
So we're trying to up the game after a little bit. So
I had a question I was hoping you might cover or give some insight on. What are your thoughts on making a rival character the lead antagonist instead of using a more traditional villain? I'm interested in the idea of an antagonist who isn't necessarily evil, but who constantly clashes with the protagonist because of opposing goals. It seems like that kind of conflict could feel more personal and emotionally engaging than a standard bad guy setup. So, what do you guys think? And if you had the choice, which one would you go for? Do you like traditional villains, or would you rather try to go for a rival? Okay, I like this question because I like this idea. I don't think I've ever done a rival villain because I don't even know what to call them. Because when I say rival, I don't think of bad guy. I think of a guy that here, I'm guessing is the party. It's another thing I want to get into. Can a whole party have one rival against all of them?
yes, I would say that you can. And if you read carefully, he doesn't say bad guy. He says villain,
Villain,
right?
yeah.
And he also is careful to use the word antagonist, which is a good way to frame it because traditional stories rely villain and bad guy are almost synonymous, right? And antagonist often gets lumped in with villain and bad guy. But the reason the question is so observant and so, for lack of a better word, insightful, is that it teases out the difference between all three of these concepts, whether he does so explicitly or not. He's getting to the difference. So let's kind of go down, broadly speaking, the three different kind of pillar categories and where they overlap before we get into the substance of actually what I'll get into, and rather than stating a preference, which I will do, but I'd like to get into, like I do if you listen to our show, Ed or Eddie or whatever you prefer, the I'm constantly on this jag on this show about trade-offs and how when you do one thing in one direction, it comes at a cost of something else in your story, for your characters, whatever. If you want a real thoughtful, meticulous, investigative story, that's probably going to come at the cost of pacing, for instance. And if you want a real fast-paced story, things were happening, the plot is moving along, it'll probably come at the cost of some more quiet character moments. It might come at the cost of some world building cohesion because you're just moving so fast and breaking things that some things might just not add up upon reflection. So it's really important, rather than to kind of say, here's what I prefer, like go, okay, what are the trade-offs and what are you getting with each tactic, let's say. With each tactic, what are you getting? And so then we can kind of get into maybe some of the more fun stuff about like why we prefer one versus the other. That's just going to be whether our sensibilities align with yours, and they might not, and that's fine because part of the fun of a game is being able to run it the way you want to run it and the way your players want to run it. So, but let's start with a bad guy, right? So a bad guy is somebody who, within the context of the world, is behaving immorally by the rules of your world, right?
Hmm.
So they are possibly a villain and certainly an antagonist, but these are all kind of like subsets of one another, right? Like all villains are antagonists, but not all antagonists are villains, and all bad guys are villains, but they're not all villain. Or all bad guys are antagonists, but they're not all villains. So it's like
Right.
this weird
Yeah.
kind of Aurora Boreas of triangle of things that they are.
Hmm.
So a bad guy, he behaves immorally within the context of your world. And so what that means is he may or may not be somebody who is integral to your plot. This is why he doesn't necessarily fit the role of a villain. He's an antagonist because he provides some sort of challenge to the players. If the players are heroic, then presumably bad actors in the world are going to be someone that the PCs need to thwart in some way,
Hmm.
right? But a key distinction here is that the PCs thwart a bad guy, but a villain thwarts the PCs. And so he's a villain is more reactive. He's more, or she is more Machiavellian, is more in control of the plot strings of the narrative. So a lieutenant or even just some mid-ranged boss, mini boss or whatever is a bad guy, or even a random character that the PCs might encounter, or even an NPC might be a bad guy, but he wouldn't be the villain because the villain is the one that puppeteers the greater plot.
Yeah.
So that, and I feel like I've kind of touched on the other two categories, but we'll kind of go through them.
Hmm.
So so that's a bad guy, right? A bad guy may or may not be a villain, and he just kind of does things that the world communicates are wrong. And the more morally gray your world, the less crisp it is who bad guys are. And this is the big benefit of not really buying into a bad guy mentality is if you like morally gray and complex characters, NPCs or just, whatever, then you probably could do away with the idea of somebody being a bad guy. Because that what that does is it flattens and simplifies the moral landscape of your narrative. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be good because moral complexity can be interesting. But recognize that when you do that, sometimes you can erode the catharsis of defeating a bad guy, right? The worse a character is, the more the world and consequently the PCs view them as just in the wrong, an obstacle to be defeated in an archetypical kind of way, the more catharsis they get by defeating them. Uh, but if you want more nuanced complexity and exploration of character values and stuff, you could do away with the concept of a bad guy and have a more morally gray landscape. So the key distinction here is that the villain is like the top of the food chain, right? Not all
Hmm.
bad guys are the villain. Um, the villain is the one whose goals oppose the PCs, and there's some sort of uh, zero sum dichotomy, meaning that everything that the villain achieves directly it takes something away from the PCs, and everything that the PCs achieve directly takes like they can't both be winning at the same time, right? Like it's like a hockey game or whatever,
Hmm.
right? Like I score a goal, it's good for me and simultaneously bad for you. There's some things that can be good for both where you could both be kind of achieving. Like if Matt and I are both playing Donkey Kong in a competitive way, we can both be racking up points, and every point I rack up doesn't in any way detract from his points. He can be doing well, and I can be doing well, and the real challenge is just who's doing better,
Hmm.
right? But good plots and good narratives often strive for some sort of zero sum game between the villain who has architected his goals as antithetical to the PCs. And whether he's evil or a bad guy gets to the heart of your question. Both categories are what you would call antagonists. Now, an antagonist is just somebody who provokes the PCs. it like through a variety of methods, typically because they're working against them. But this may or may not have anything to do with your overarching plot. The
Hmm.
villain is the one that drives the overall plot. And so you'll likely have myriad antagonists, sometimes even within your own party, like two players could be antagonistic to each other, or there could be a third party NPC who's not a bad guy or a villain, but he just creates problems for the PCs. These are probably best to think of as like obstacles, because not all obstacles bear on the over don't not all obstacles push the plot forward, and often they just stand in the way of the plot. A good villain creates obstacles that affect the plot, but an antagonist doesn't need to. So that's much more of like a nebulous term. So I think that's like the three delineating characteristics of bad guy versus villain versus antagonist. Anything to add there, Matt?
Well, I brought up like a couple different definitions of rival
Hmm.
just in case we want to know. Because when I think rival, I think of that, like, yeah, you guys are against each other, but in the end, you're the bestest of friends. That's what I was thinking of when I think of a rival. So I wanted to pull something up in case anybody else had different ideas of it. And according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, a
Oh,
rival is a
don't use Webster's. Oh my God, I can't bear it. I can't bear it. Use
how about something
Ameri
from dictionary.com?
How about Oxford or American Heritage?
Cambridge?
Cambridge is good too.
Okay. So with Cambridge, Cambridge is a person, group, or organization that competes with another for the same objective, affection, or superiority. It often refers to a competitor aiming to defeat or outperform another, such as in sports, business, or politics, but can also mean an equal or peer that matches another in quality. I like with the synonyms down here, they have like all the words that I was thinking of, except for one, which I didn't know was actually going to be in here: competitor, opponent, adversary, contender, equal, peer. Those were all the ones that first come to my mind. But they also
Hmm.
have antagonist as a synonym for it.
It's so yeah. This is kind of what I was delving into. Once I got bad guy, antagonist, and villain out of the way, then you then we can examine what a rival is,
Yeah.
right? And
And then what
so
is a, just in case, because I don't know, what is an antonym?
an antonym is something that is the opposite of it.
Oh, okay. So the antonyms would be ally, partner, or associate.
Right. So to me, a rival is kind of can be a subset of uh, probably can be a subset of villain or can be a subset of antagonist. Probably most aptly, it is a subset of antagonist because,
Hmm.
as Matt noted, a rival is rarely overtly evil. The way to think about it is just they have different, or actually they either have the same goals as you and achieve them differently, or they have differing goals than you and just so happen to be going along the same path to achieve them. They want a different result than you want, um, and they're tracking along the same path as you to get there, just trying to ensure that the result is different. This is why often the sports rivalries are called such, because you're both after the Stanley Cup, right? But the result that you want, Matt, is for the Boston Bruins to win the Stanley
Hmm.
Cup. And the result that I want is for the Colorado Avalanche. And if they're playing each other, then they're rivals because they have the same goal, but they expect different results. But
Hmm.
it could also be that they have different goals than you, but they're pursuing that goal in a like a myriad different ways that are kind of tracking along your side. So usually there's some sort of uh, I would say it hinges on probably on respect. A villain is not someone you respect; they're someone you likely fear, and you fear what it is they will do. And so the big difference between that and a rival is that a rival is one who you respect.
Hmm.
And so don't necessarily think of as villainous just so much as they have different goals than we have, or they're going about those goals in a different way, they're going about the same goal in a different way. And so this is fertile ground for establishing what brand of antagonist you want. Do you want a villain or do you want a rival? And you get different things with those, right? And I'm trying to think of some good examples. Like I think Magneto in the X-Men is probably one of the
Ooh,
best examples.
yes. Apollo
He
from Rocky.
Yeah, yeah. Apollo is a good example too. So they're rivals. They're their main antagonist, but they're not really villains, right? They're
Right.
just because they're characters that have depth in their own right, and you kind of understand their motivations. So that hinges on empathy, right? If you have empathy, or sympathy for that matter. Sympathy is not a very great way to like frame a villain, right? Because what that does is it makes them a victim. If you make a villain a victim, they're no longer villainous. They have just moral cause for their behavior. And empathy is a good way to get us to understand why the antagonist is doing what it is that they're doing. And if you can understand that, then they're just more like they're more grounded and they're more they evoke respect more than they do fear. And so leaving some things in the shadow and mystery is what's key here. Characters that don't have actually a really good example of this particular evoking empathy, evoking sympathy, or the third way, I was just watching a video on this by a guy named Brandon McNulty, and he cites some book that I haven't read, so I'm sure it comes from that book, but I got it from him, so I'll give credit where credit is due. The third way would be to evoke envy, right? If you're envious of a character because James Bond or Indiana Jones, you're envious of them because you want what they have, right? You want to be suave and you want to be powerful and you want to be skilled. Probably doesn't play into the whole villain discussion all that much, but those are basically the three ways. And as a crisp example of the same character, take a look at the Joker. So the Joker, there are two prominent movies, two prominent performances of that character. One is Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight, where he is a villain. He is the villainest of villains that ever villained. And the other one is Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal. And we could get into the weeds about whether it's supposed to be the same character or whatever, but for the purposes of this discussion, it doesn't matter. So the key difference is that in the Joaquin Phoenix Joker, he's the protagonist.
Hmm.
And the reason that he's the protagonist and not the villain is because we empathize with him and because we have sympathy for him. Like he's just been kicked by society and he's just been like marginalized and he's traumatized and he's fucked up. And so this makes you kind of like root for him. And so when he does kind of horrible shit, it's more forgivable. Contrast that with the Joker, who is just shrouded in mystery. We don't know anything about
Hmm.
him, right? He just shows up and he just starts fucking everything up. And like they even allude to it, like no markings, no background, no labels on his clothes, nothing in his pockets but knives and lint, right? Like this is just like a black box of a character, and this is how you get somebody to be like, oh my God, this guy is fucking scary because he could do anything, he can be anywhere. We don't know much about his background, right? And same thing with like the same character, like take Darth Vader in the original trilogy is more villainous, and as he kind of like he becomes his younger version of himself is the protagonist of the sequel trilogies, right? And it's like this is why a lot of people really did not like that background story. I feel the same way kind of about Wolverine. Like I don't need his background really. It's better if it's kind of mysterious. So that's kind of what you're giving up. If you want a more morally complex, nuanced antagonist who can challenge your player's conception of what's good, can force your players into maybe unlikely alliances, and you want that kind of like gradient of uh, what will this cause my players to do when their beliefs are challenged by somebody who has just cause, grounded rationale, well thought out reasons, motivations, and just arrived at a different conclusion, right? They just
Hmm.
arrived at the conclusion that like, no, humans aren't our friends. We need to dominate them as a species, a la Magneto, versus no, it's not. That's not the way forward, right? And so that's good, but what it can also do is the characters don't likely have as much of a burn and a desire to put an end to something that they think is just a crisp black and white, like, the Fellowship and Sauron, right? Like
Mm,
Sauron's just fucking evil. Like he is just evil. He is trying to ruin the world. We got to stop him. And so that catharsis is a little bit more, but it's lacking in nuance and complexity. So that'll depend on how many, like, what your players are up for, um, kind of what they like, how they like to be challenged, if they like more straightforward, simple, archetypical good versus evil narratives, then go more with a villain. And if they like things that are more complex, force them to think, force them to examine their own beliefs, to delve into maybe aspects of their characters that wouldn't get examined in any other plot thread, then a rival might be a good answer. But that often requires much more thoughtful construction of a
hmm
villain, their motives, and the landscape in which they exist. And it can also require you to have more character moments, that force the characters into role playing encounters with NPCs, with the antagonists themselves, with other people in the party, to kind of like, how are we feeling about this? And sometimes that can crush the pacing of your campaign, right? It can slow it to a halt if that's not something that the players are in for. So think of like soliloquies or dialogue with the villain. you know, Dialogue with the villain can often reveal their motives, and you can kind of like, it can be a good role playing opportunity. But there's also something really chilling about a villain that doesn't engage in that. Think of the Terminator. Terminator's not like
Ooh.
pontificating about his goals and his motives. He just shows up, he doesn't say shit, and he just starts trying to kill you.
No, man,
Or
he's
the
got directives.
Yeah, yeah, or the alien from the Alien movies,
Hmm
or even the alien from the Predator movie, for that matter. Like they're precisely menacing because they will not be disavowed of their sole purpose because they're a machine, they're an animal, whatever. And a villain that's like that, like it's just singly minded, and or Hans Gruber is probably kind of this way too. He's menacing but also likable at the same time,
hmm
right? And it's like so I would say that those are the kind of big trade-offs. I don't know if you have anything to kind of add texture to that, Matt.
So I had a few things that I'd be worried about when I was thinking about it, because in the email I was trying to find out how long they wanted to go with, because it just says lead antagonist.
Hmm.
So is this for like an entire campaign, or is this just like a little couple adventures? Because I think the main reason I've never done a rival in any of my games is because of this. If I did a rival, it would have to be pretty short.
Mm.
Otherwise, I think I would run into some of these hiccups that I thought about. Like I wrote down a note: keeping the rival compelling without making them outright villainous
Hmm.
is something to think about. And I think I would start him off in the first event. If this was going to be like my campaign long antagonist was a rival, I think after like two adventures, I'd start making him just evil,
It,
because I wouldn't know how to keep up with it. Like,
it's
and even you said I had down here the balancing of sympathy and tension with the rivalry, as well as preventing the rivalry from becoming repetitive. Because how many times can you chase after that one goal over and over again, and it still be compelling enough that you think of this person as a rival? And that's what got me to think of the end here, making the players invested in both sides, the rival side and yours.
Yeah, and that's where the moral malleability comes in.
Hmm
Think about it this way: rivals, what their value is it depends on how much character growth you want to have, right?
hmm
Because in a more straightforward villain hero dynamic, the presumption is that the characters already have arrived at moral conclusions, and the villain's moral conclusions conflict with them, right? And so the action of the narrative is just focusing on defeating that. It's all a battle, right? It's a clash between two worldviews. But what a rival does is it challenges you to be the best version of yourself. This is why a lot of people that were rivals on the court, on the ice, on the field for years and years and years often end up forging a very deep bond because steel sharpens steel, so to speak, right?
hmm
Like, and so like somebody that challenges you to be the best version of yourself is challenging you morally, and there's a lot of fertile ground there for character, like character arcs, individual character arcs. So if you're more into individual character arcs, I think a rival gets you there better than a villain gets you there.
Hmm.
Um, and if you're more into kind of plot arcs, a villain is probably better suited. You could have some hybrid of the two, but a villain doesn't really force the characters to change or examine their beliefs. He or she challenges them to defeat them.
Hmm.
And then it's just about climbing the mountain, and that's going to be largely plot driven. A rival also will have the notable benefit of, again, kind of to the point about character arcs and complexity within the plot. There's more opportunities for plot twists with a rival, and the reason is that rivals require a little more legwork to establish them as a character. And one of the things I should say that makes character work effective is creating characters that have contradictions, and those contradictions can come out, and um, they can be great plot twists, right? Like if you create a rival who doesn't hate the characters, but just is like, I'm opposed to them, then you frame them as they're just a person of conviction. They just believe more in what it is they believe than what the characters believe. And the characters need to be defeated, but not because they have any animosity toward the characters. But let's say you created a rival that was also simultaneously the reason that they were pursuing something was for like the greater good of the realm or whatever. Maybe they're misguided, but they believe that this is the best way to bring peace to the realm or to something like that. Then they're a person of honor. And so when those things bump up against certain things in the uh, narrative, you can leverage them for great plot twists. Maybe he's opposed to them and he's trying to work against the characters. But then maybe there's some like monster that's not like part of his machinations. There's a dragon or something, and he saves the characters, right? Because he can't like he thinks that this dragon is a harm to the realm, and he's a man of honor. And so when the characters least expect it, it's the darkest hour and things are going bad, he swoops in and he saves them. It doesn't make him an ally suddenly, but he's acting on principle because he has these contradictions where it's
Hmm.
like, these people are opposed to me, but it bumps up against some value that they have. That can be great role playing opportunities, and it takes your plot in a different direction and causes the players to re-examine everything they think they know about this person, and maybe it tempers how they think about them. Like a villain that's like the Terminator, the alien from Predator, or whatever. Like when they're confront him, even if he were try to be like, let me explain myself, the characters are just primed to be like, no, fuck you, you're done, right?
Hmm.
But if they have this kind of ongoing history of being confronted with these contradictions, maybe they're just like I said, they're a person of honor, or they have a lot of dignity, or they're exacting revenge on some nobleman that the PCs are aligned with, but a generation ago killed their father in some war. It's like suddenly the characters might have a little bit of pause about what to do with somebody who they respect, and it's not so easy to just kind of like going guns blazing and defeating them. That can be very action packed and it can be very dramatic in its own right, but it has no it's action packed um and dramatic precisely because it has no context to it. It has no gradient, and so you can focus on the action more, but it doesn't really like have the same character implications or moral nuance.
So, which one would you choose? I'm going to go with starting off with how the email was kind of made. If you were doing a long form campaign and this was going to be your antagonist of the whole thing, would you prefer to do like just saying if you started this tomorrow, just to choose one or the other one, which one would you choose, a rival or a traditional villain?
I'm with you. I think it would be dependent on how long. I mean, are we talking about a level 1 to 8 campaign, a 1 to
Let's say
10,
one
1 to
one to
20,
15.
1 to 15? Um, that's tough. Um, Given the party that I have, I probably am inclined to choose a villain.
Yeah.
But here's what I was trying to do. I think when you get a couple clicks up and you've done a few iterations of these things kind of over and over, you get kind of try to shake it up a little bit. In the Blood Moon campaign, I was trying to have that be an evolution,
Hmm.
where it was like the Red Woman initially is just like a straightforward maniacal villain, right? And we didn't get to the end of that campaign, but I think as the campaign went on and you kind of like talked to her a little more and kind of learned a little bit about what she was doing, you kind of started to be like, all right, I mean, I kind of get why she's doing this. Like, I mean, she's obviously misguided, but uh certainly ambitious, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't seem to the big reveal like was going to be there's this thing, this trope in D&D where you have this first initial villain and the villain is like the boots on the ground lieutenant or whatever, and you just kind of make the assumption that they're working for some bigger threat, right? Some
Hmm.
puppet master. And the big reveal in the Blood Moon campaign was going to be like, no, no, it's just her, right? There's no puppet master. There's no mechanism to this. And so I tried to kind of build into her like some really core uh, ideas that are very, very principled, but just very dark. Like she's very fatalistic. She's very nihilistic. Um, and she has this narrative about the world just needs a reckoning, right? Like none of this is going well. You're all just puppets, and um, you're suffering under the yoke of all of these things. And the dark, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, Matt, but like the dark, dark ending that I had in mind for the campaign, which I'm still kind of bummed I didn't get to see come to fruition, was that basically she's right about everything, right? Like her position is that like, oh, you're part of this faction, and oh, Matt, you come from this noble family, and oh, Cody, you're trying to find your the remnants of your wife. You're all just being like puppeteered and manipulated, right? Like these systems, you are pawns in a greater game that you do not realize. And then we get to the end of the campaign, and it turns out, no, your family, Matt, is trying to secure this artifact for dominance, and the faction, the Harper's faction, is doing precisely the same thing. And Cody's the voice that he hears of Katya and his wife is not his wife, right? It is his pit fiend father manipulating him to like engage in this blood war. And so like we never got to that, but I was like really I was like I thought it was such an ingenious idea that it's like she's just totally right about fucking everything. And then the party has to go like, what do we do? Do we just
Yeah.
defeat her now?
Hmm.
Because I mean, we can't just let the Tarask like fucking kill millions of innocent people.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, it's like, I mean, her whole logic checks out,
Yeah. Well,
and
damn, man. She's
so, and
right.
I don't know if that's like a rival per se, but I'm more interested in kind of how an antagonist evolves over the course of a campaign, how they
Hmm.
adjust and how they maneuver as the PCs come into the fore. But if I had to say that I would prefer, just based on the sensibilities of our group, I think that you and Cody and Patrick probably prefer more straightforward villains,
Hmm.
precisely because the you can when it comes to like character work, I think you guys are more inwardly focused. You're kind of focused on like what is my character arc personally, almost independent of the plot, and then you kind of throw down the gauntlet for me to like, hey, incorporate this into the plot in some way.
Hmm.
And I don't think that always hinges on like who the villain or what the villain is. But if it's deeply personal, and you can craft a story where the rival touches the character arcs of each of the PCs, that can really work, but it's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who is like so keen to invest that much story work into the game because I do have a tendency to want to keep things a little more pacing along
Yeah.
with like, some action and stuff going on because I just long-winded role-playing sessions where you're examining the nature of morality and stuff like that are not
Hmm.
typically something that the players that I've had have an appetite for. Not to say that I wouldn't want be up to run it if they did, but I would probably land on more traditional villain. But it just depends on how experienced you are. I think the more experienced GM could run a rival. He doesn't illuminate for us how long he's been running a game,
Yeah.
but I would suggest that if you're just starting out, um, then I would err more on the side of traditional villains,
Hmm.
uh, and maybe have some NPCs that are antagonists, or maybe even low-level rivals, but making the central antagonist a rival takes a little bit of like experience and writing, because the
Hmm.
last thing you want to do is have a rival that doesn't hit hard, right? And in order to have it hit hard, it has to be pretty well calibrated, to the sensibilities of the group, to the whole, how it fits into the plot threads, to what themes you're exploring, to what moral complexity you think is important, and tracking, if you have multiple PCs, 3 or 4 PCs arcs as they relate to the rivals arc as it plays into the narrative arc, takes a lot of management, and I don't know that I would be up for it at this point. I'm certain I could do it if I put the work in. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah, if I wanted to put the work in, I could probably do it, but I don't want to put the work in. That would just take up 9/10 of my whole prep time. And I would
Hmm.
probably have to extend prep time in order to make sure that it worked out well. And then I know a good way, a good way to get into it, maybe even figure out if you can do it or not. Back in our AD&D campaign, the original campaign, my very first,
The OG.
this might be a good way to do it because we had an antagonist in there, the Drow. I don't
The
remember what his real name
Drow.
was, but we just called him the Drow.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever learned his real name. He
We
did
didn't,
have a name.
but you showed me his character sheet one day, and I saw that he had a name. And I was like, "Ooh, the Drow's got a name," and you were like, "Duh, of course
Yeah.
he had a name, idiot." But when he started, he was like our villain.
Hmm.
But we never realized every time that we went up against him, he would whoop the shit out of us, but would never kill us.
Yeah.
And sometimes he would drop hints into helping us. And he became, because after him, the Warlord came around and he became our
Yeah.
big bad guy.
Yeah.
After Red Hawk and all, we figured all that shit out. We were like, oh, Red Hawk is her and she is Red Hawk. That's great. We've been friends this entire time. And
She was a rival. Yeah, she
yeah,
was a rival.
but the Drow was always that guy that just had fun fighting us and then would just leave and be like, better luck next time. And I
Yeah.
thought he became a really good rival because I just thought in his head, he was just like, I want to see how strong they actually get. And if they
That's
can beat
exactly
me, that's awesome.
that's exactly what he was. Is, if you recall, he was lieutenant of this lich. Um,
Mm,
and like, you guys never got to confront the lich because he lived in this tower that you had to get all the shards to like get inside because of a force field or whatever trophy MacGuffin thing I had going
yeah.
on at the time. But that's exactly what he was doing. He rubbed up against you when you were get ready to confound him, and then he was just trying to like test the waters to see how powerful you were getting, to know that the how far along the lich's plot needed to be to stay ahead of you.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I guess the real question would be to ask yourself this, Ed. Do you like writing adventures or do you like building adventures?
Ooh, that's a great question about it.
And if you like building adventures, you like crafting out dungeons, hiding treasure, coming up with clever traps, populating dungeons with monsters, having wilderness encounters that feel dynamic and alive, chase sequences, skill challenges. Um, the rival plot thread might be a bridge too far,
Hmm.
because if you're going to build a good adventure, then if you're going to write a good adventure, it's like both of those are very time intensive. So if you're going to write a good adventure, you just want to have good plot beats, you want to have good characters, you want to have like a really like interesting plot that moves along. But the details of like each location, each dungeon's not rich. Maybe you're just kind of, the characters are just kind of going in like, okay, we got to go over here, we got to defeat this bad guy. It's a little 5 room thing. There's not lots of like tactics involved. There's not lots of exploration and stuff like that where you're uncovering like hidden truths, finding magic weapons, disabling traps and stuff like that. You just go in there, you kill the guy, you get some information in a role playing encounter, and then you're on to the next plot beat. That can be much more loose, and that doesn't take as much of your time. And if you like writing adventures, then go with the rival. Maybe try it out. But if you like building adventures, things need to the plot needs to be more pared back, and it can't have as many moving parts. Every moving part that you have that's into I'm going to call it like the structure, the scaffolding of
Hmm.
the adventure, and by which I mean the locations, the encounter tactics, the exploration phases, hex crawling, stuff like that. That's much more like systems driven. Um, if you're doing that, then it's hard to also write a really dynamic, interesting plot. If for no other reason, not just that it's time intensive, but like there's only so much story you can get in if you're like you have a dungeon crawl and you stack up a few encounters and the party is spending most of its time fighting and exploring and disabling traps and like dealing with environmental hazards and stuff like that. There's not much time for dialogue and story and revelations and plot twists because it just the other thing just eats up all the screen time.
Hmm.
And so, it's really, really hard to kind of get a decent amount of plot into a well-structured adventure. And even if you do, even if you hit those beats, they'll probably feel really shoehorned, or you'll have to have lots of NPCs that like are like info dumping on the characters, giving them tons of exposition because the players need things need to evolve organically, and in order to do that, the players need less structure. They need more free form kind of mystery and open-ended threads and intrigue than they need go here, do this, get this thing, kill this bad guy, come back for your next assignment.
Hmm.
Um, and most traditionally, D&D kind of operates on the second structure and
Yep.
tries to just like sprinkle in a little bit of plot here and there. But if you want something that's more story and character driven, then write a good adventure. Don't sweat the details on like where every stitch of treasure is located or whatever, and you can probably arrive at a pretty good balance.
Yeah, I would go with uh, using a rival as a long-term antagonist. Bad idea unless you really love to put the work in for it. Try the Drow method, David's Drow method. They started as the prime bad guy, kind of fell off to this side rival that we had while trying to take on the big bad evil guy.
Yeah. I think you can do two. You can almost just like with anything, you can do kind of a hybrid. So I would say if you're not convinced whether you want to go full rival, try something that's a traditional villain, um, but just give them a little more texture than you otherwise would give them.
Hmm.
Give them a way, give the PCs a way to glimpse into this character, the villain's daily life, their motives, and their reasoning. And then they don't necessarily going to be a rival, because rival almost kind of implies, to some degree, it implies that the characters are a peer, right?
Right.
That you're because it, and a villain is a mountain to be climbed. The villain
Hmm.
is this challenging, right? The villain is really challenging and he's working behind the scenes, and the PCs don't likely confront him or her until the end of the campaign when they're powerful enough. But a rival, you would have to have frequent touchstones, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to be touching base with them
There's
throughout.
constant clashes.
Yeah, yeah, and but it also kind of implies that they're a peer, and that's again a drawback because what you have to do is you have to basically go, okay, a rival needs to kind of level with the PCs, right? So if it's a single rival and he's competent enough to defeat or challenge all of your PCs together, then it's like, okay, how many levels above them do they need to be? How much? And you have to keep track of all that.
Hmm.
Um, and each time they meet him, then he is probably farther along because you can't have a level 10 bad guy fighting level 1 characters. It'll just kill them. But if he's only level 4, then and he stays there, then when the PCs get to be level 4, they're going to kick the shit out of him. And that ruins the whole like challenge ladder of having a rival. But you could probably do some hybrid where it's kind of a little bit of both. I
Yeah.
had the thing where it was like give the villain a good reason why they don't just dispatch with the PCs out of hand. But that is often pretty tropey and kind of silly. Um, but if you don't mind that, I mean, sometimes it's fine to have cliches and tropes in your stuff. But
Oh, sure.
it, just recognize if you do it too much, it kind of breaks the world. Like, why would all these goblins take these characters prisoner when they could just kill them? Where they stand to gain by having them prisoners? It's like they're goblins, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just makes no sense. So, yeah, you could probably try a hybrid and then maybe see how that goes, and as the campaign is going, maybe kind of shift tenor from more traditional villain to, if the PCs learn more information about the the bad guy or the antagonist, then maybe have it pivot a little bit, and you give yourself the freedom to adapt on the fly.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. I hope that we gave out at least some good information to you there, Ed. Go ahead and write back. Let us know if we gave you any good tips, because we hope we're doing something good on this show. We love, that's what the whole point. You guys write in. We talk about it. We give some tips, little opinions here and there. And if you want to be like Ed, how about you send your email to insidethegmstudio@gmail.com. Ask us some questions. As you can tell, we love talking about this shit, and that's the whole point of this show. Or, guess what? You can come usually every Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/InsideTheGM Studio. Watch us live and ask questions. But for this week, for Inside the GM Studio, I've been your host, Matt.